Stop apologizing. The daughter you're looking for, she died in the storm the night you kicked her out. That was the moment 13 years of silence finally broke. Standing in the VIP lot of my sister's university, my father wept, begging for a second chance. But he forgot that he used his first chance to throw a 15-year-old into a hurricane over a golden child's lie. They thought I was erased, gone forever. Instead, I returned as the keynote speaker they never saw coming, holding the microphone at the very graduation my sister tried to steal. This isn't just a story about survival, it's about how success became my ultimate revenge. In the Wilson household, the hierarchy was invisible but absolute. My younger sister Jessica was the golden child, fragile, sensitive, and demanding of constant emotional maintenance. I, Emily, was the convenient shock absorber. If Jessica failed a test, it was because I didn't help her study. If she broke a vase, it was because I distracted her. I learned early on that my achievements were threats to her ego, so I learned to be small, quiet, and fiercely independent. I thought I could just keep my head down until college, but I underestimated how dangerous Jessica's jealousy could be. The catalyst wasn't money or grades, it was a boy. Ryan was the varsity quarterback and arguably the most popular guy in our high school. He was also failing AP chemistry. When he asked me for tutoring, it wasn't romantic, it was purely transactional. We spent 3 afternoons in the library, balancing chemical equations. That was it. But for Jessica, who had been writing Mrs. Ryan Miller in her diary since freshman year, my mere proximity to him was a declaration of war. She didn't scream, she didn't throw a tantrum. Instead, she went disturbingly quiet. That Friday, as the news channels blared warnings about a massive storm system moving up the coast, the atmosphere at our dinner table was suffocating. Outside, the wind was already howling, but the real devastation was waiting for me over a plate of cold spaghetti. "I can't take it anymore," Jessica whispered, her voice trembling perfectly. She dropped her fork and pulled up the sleeve of her sweater. There was a dark, ugly bruise on her forearm. My mother gasped, dropping her glass. "Jessica, oh my God. What happened?" "Emily did it," she sobbed, burying her face in her hands. "She shoved me into the lockers today because Ryan said hi to me." Before I could even process the lie, she pulled out her phone. She had created fake screenshots, an entire fabricated group chat where I was supposedly trashing her, calling her pathetic, and bragging about physically hurting her to keep her away from Ryan. "I didn't—" I stood up, my hands shaking. "Mom! Dad, that's not true. I never touched her. Those messages are fake." "Enough!" My father Robert slammed his hand on the table. The plates rattled. He didn't ask to see my phone. He didn't ask for my side of the story. He looked at Jessica's tears. Then he looked at me with a mix of disgust and disappointment that cut deeper than any physical blow. "I knew you were jealous, Emily," he said, his voice dangerously low. "But I didn't think you were sick. You're twisted. You're bullying your own sister because you can't stand to see her happy." "Dad, please just listen." "I am done listening to your lies," he roared, standing up. "You are dangerous to have in this house." That was the moment the gavel fell. In their court, Jessica's tears were evidence, and my silence was a confession. I didn't know it yet, but that dinner was the last meal I would ever eat as their daughter. The storm outside was intensifying, but inside, I had just been swept away. "Get out!" The command hung in the air, heavier than the thunder rattling the window panes. I stared at my father Robert, searching for a trace of hesitation, a flicker of the man who used to teach me how to ride a bike. There was nothing, just cold, impenetrable disgust. "Dad, there's a hurricane warning," I pleaded, my voice cracking. "It's dangerous out there. I have nowhere to go." "That's not my problem anymore," he snapped, moving toward the front door. "I don't need a sick, manipulative liar living under my roof. You want to destroy this family, fine, but you'll do it from the outside." I turned to my mother. Linda was standing behind the kitchen island, her hand resting protectively on Jessica's shoulder. Jessica wasn't crying anymore. She was watching me with the detached curiosity of a scientist observing an insect. I looked my mother in the eye, a silent, desperate beg. Please, I am your daughter too. Linda looked down. She smoothed Jessica's hair and turned her back on me. That silence hurt more than any slap ever could. My father grabbed my arm, marching me to the entryway. I barely had time to grab my windbreaker before the door was yanked open. The storm hit me instantly, a wall of freezing rain and wind that nearly knocked me off balance. Don't come back until you're ready to admit what you are, Robert shouted over the gale. The heavy oak door slammed shut. Then came the sound that would haunt my nightmares for a decade, the deadbolt sliding into place. Click. I stood on the porch for a minute, shivering violently, waiting for them to realize this was insane. Waiting for the door to open. It didn't. Through the living room window, I saw the warm glow of the lamp and the silhouette of my family sitting down to finish dinner. I had been erased. I started walking. I didn't know where I was going, maybe the library, maybe the police station, but the storm had other plans. Visibility was zero. The rain was blinding sheets of gray and the wind screamed like a living thing. I was 15, soaked to the bone and shivering so hard my teeth ached. I reached the intersection near the old highway. The traffic light was a blur of green and red through the downpour. I stepped off the curb, head down against the wind. I never saw the car. I only felt the blinding wash of high-beam headlights and the screech of tires fighting for traction on wet asphalt. The impact was sudden and violent, a massive force lifting me off my feet. The world spun sideways. I hit the pavement hard, and the last thing I heard before the darkness swallowed me was a woman's terrified voice screaming, "Oh my God, hang on, honey, just hang on." Waking up felt like swimming through concrete. The first thing I registered was the rhythmic beep, beep, beep of a heart monitor, and then the smell sharp, antiseptic, and old coffee. I blinked my eyes open, expecting to see an empty room. Instead, a woman was sitting in the uncomfortable plastic chair next to my bed, reading a medical journal. It was the driver, Dr. Sarah Bennett. "You're awake," she said, closing her book. Her voice wasn't angry or fearful. It was steady. "You have a severe concussion and 3 broken ribs, Emily, but you're alive." Before I could answer, the door swung open. My parents walked in. If this were a movie, they would have rushed to my bedside, weeping with relief. In reality, Robert stood at the foot of the bed with his arms crossed, while Linda wouldn't even look at me. They looked annoyed, as if my near-death experience was an inconvenience to their weekend schedule. "We spoke to the police," Robert said, his tone clipped. "We told them you have a history of acting out, that you ran away." "I didn't run away." I rasped, my throat dry. "You threw me out." "Don't start with the lies again," Linda snapped, finally looking up. "Not here." Dr. Bennett stood up. She wasn't a tall woman, but in that moment she looked 10 feet tall. She radiated the kind of quiet academic authority that makes a room go silent. "Mr. and Mrs. Wilson, I'm Dr. Sarah Bennett, Chief of Psychology at the university, and I find it fascinating that your concern is controlling the narrative rather than your daughter's internal bleeding." Robert stiffened. "This is a private family matter. She's troubled. She's sick." "She's a child who was walking on a highway in a hurricane," Dr. Bennett countered, her voice ice cold. "I heard what she mumbled in the ambulance. She said she wasn't allowed to go home." "She's not," Robert spat out, the mask slipping. "If she's going to continue this behavior, she can find somewhere else to rot. We're done." The air left the room. My own father had just disowned me in front of a stranger. I waited for the crushing pain, but instead, I felt a strange, numbing clarity. They really don't love me. Dr. Bennett looked from them to me, making a silent calculation. She turned back to my parents. "Fine. If you're done with her, then you won't mind signing temporary guardianship over to the state, or to me." My parents blinked, stunned. "You want her?" Linda asked, as if I were a used piece of furniture. I do, Dr. Bennett said, looking at me with a warmth I hadn't seen in 15 years. Because unlike you, I don't see a sick child. I see a survivor. That night, I didn't go back to the house that had erased me. I went home with the woman who nearly killed me, and for the first time in my life, I felt safe. The Wilson family had thrown me away, but they had inadvertently given me the greatest gift of all, a way out. 13 years can blink by when you're busy rebuilding a soul from scratch. Life with Dr. Bennett, who insisted I call her Sarah, was a masterclass in resilience. She didn't coddle me. She didn't pity me. She handed me a stack of college applications and said, the best way to silence them is to outgrow them. And I did. I didn't just survive, I thrived. I traded my fear for grit and my silence for a voice. By 28, I was unrecognizable from the shivering girl on the highway. I had graduated top of my class from Columbia and founded Phoenix Rising, a nonprofit foundation dedicated to providing full-ride scholarships for displaced youth. We were currently managing a $10 million endowment. I was no longer the invisible Wilson daughter. I was the Emily Wilson, a woman featured in Forbes, a woman who commanded rooms just by walking into them. Meanwhile, curiosity occasionally got the better of me. I checked Jessica's social media. Her life was a curated gallery of perfect. Sorority parties, beach trips, and captions praising mom and dad for funding her lifestyle. She was still the golden child, polished and protected, coasting through a communications degree at State University, the very school where my foundation had just launched a major partnership. The universe, it turns out, has a wicked sense of humor. It started with a phone call from the president of State University. Ms. Wilson, he gushed, we would be honored if you would deliver the keynote address at this year's commencement. Your story of overcoming adversity fits our theme perfectly. I glanced at the calendar. May 21st. The date was circled in my mind because I knew from a happy graduation post on my mother's Facebook that this was Jessica's ceremony. My first instinct was to decline. Why revisit the site of my trauma? Why breathe the same air as the people who discarded me? But then I looked at Sarah, who was sipping coffee across my office. She raised an eyebrow. You're not going there to see them, Emily, she said, reading my mind. You're going there to show them what they lost. She was right. It wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming the narrative. I picked up the phone. Mr. President? I said, my voice steady and professional. I would be delighted, but I'll need full creative control over my speech. I hung up and smiled. The Wilson family thought I was dead or worse, a failure. They were about to find out that the storm they sent me into hadn't destroyed me. It had forged me. I wasn't just coming back as a speaker, I was coming back as the storm itself. The auditorium lights were blinding white hot against the darkness of the crowd. As the president introduced me, a pioneer in youth advocacy, Ms. Emily Wilson. I stepped to the podium. The applause was polite standard. I scanned the sea of faces until I found them. Third row center. Jessica was whispering to a friend, not even looking up. Robert and Linda were checking their watches. They didn't know the speaker's name. They didn't care. Good morning, I said, my voice magnified by the speaker's crisp and commanding. At the sound of my voice, Robert's head snapped up. Linda froze. Jessica dropped her program. The color drained from her face so fast she looked like a ghost. I locked eyes with my father. I didn't smile. I didn't blink. I just let him see me alive, successful, and utterly untouchable. We talk a lot about resilience. I began deviating from the teleprompter. But we rarely talk about what makes it necessary. Sometimes the obstacle isn't poverty or society. Sometimes the obstacle is the people who are supposed to protect you. The room went deadly quiet. 13 years ago, a 15-year-old girl stood in a living room not far from here. She was accused of a crime she didn't commit, a lie fabricated by a sibling who wanted to be the only star in the sky. I paused, letting the silence stretch. Her parents didn't ask for proof. They called her sick. They called her broken. And then they opened the front door and pushed her out into a hurricane. A collective gasp rippled through the audience. Thousands of heads turned. I saw Robert grip the armrests of his chair, looking like he wanted to run. Linda was weeping into her hands. Jessica stared at her lap, shrinking as her friends beside her pulled away, connecting the dots. That girl was supposed to disappear, I said, my voice rising with strength. But she didn't. She was found on the side of a highway by a stranger, Dr. Sarah Bennett. I gestured to the front row where Sarah sat beaming. She taught me that family isn't about blood. It's about who holds the umbrella when the storm comes. I leaned into the microphone for the final blow. I am standing here today to tell you, you are not defined by the people who couldn't love you. You are defined by what you build after they leave. The ovation was thunderous, but in the third row, the Wilson family sat in a crater of silence, the only three people not clapping buried under the weight of the truth. I found them waiting by the VIP exit, lurking like ghosts from a past life. Robert looked gray and shrunken. Linda's mascara was running in dark streaks down her cheeks. Jessica stood behind them, clutching her diploma, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. Emily, Robert started, his voice cracking. He took a step forward, hands open in a pleading gesture. Please, wait. I stopped. I didn't flinch. Beside me, Sarah tensed, ready to intervene, but I placed a hand on her arm. I've got this. We didn't know, Linda sobbed, reaching for me but stopping short at my icy glare. We were just trying to protect the family. We want to fix this. We want our daughter back. Yeah, Jessica chimed in, her voice trembling, trying to play the victim one last time. I was young, Emily. I was stupid. Can't we just start over? I looked at them, really looked at them, and realized I felt nothing. No anger, no fear, just the indifference you feel for strangers on a crowded street. Start over. I repeated, my voice calm and lethal. You erased me. You let me bleed out in a hospital alone while you comforted the person who put me there. We're sorry, Robert cried, desperate now. We're your family. This was it, the moment 13 years in the making. Stop apologizing, I said, cutting him off. The daughter you're looking for. She died in the storm the night you kicked her out. I turned my gaze to Jessica. And you. You won. You wanted to be the only child, congratulations. You have them all to yourself. As I turned to walk away, the final domino fell. Jessica's boyfriend, a wealthy law student she had been parading around all day, pulled his hand away from hers as if he'd been burned. You told me she was dead, he said, his voice loud enough for the gathering crowd to hear. He looked at Jessica with pure disgust. You told everyone she died in an accident. You're a sociopath. Matt, no, listen. Jessica grabbed his arm, but he shook her off and walked away. I didn't look back. I got into Sarah's car, the door closing with a solid, satisfying thud. As we drove away, leaving the wreckage of the Wilson family in the rearview mirror, I didn't feel heavy. I felt weightless. The storm was finally over. As Dr. Sarah and I drove away, I glanced in the rearview mirror one last time. I saw them in the parking lot screaming and pointing fingers, finally tearing each other apart instead of me. That was the only closure I needed. This journey taught me that blood doesn't make a family, love does. And truly, the best revenge is simply living a happy, successful life without them. If you agree that family is a choice, drop a true in the comments below. Please hit that like button and subscribe if this story resonated with you. Thank you so much for watching. Stay strong, and I'll see you in the next video.